Why are the college football experts so down on Syracuse? Why is Kyle McCord not getting any respect? Not true. Which transfer will have the biggest impact? How have the returning players bought into Coach Fran's culture? Those are just some of the questions that we are going to answer on this Axe, Brent, and Emily Anything edition, Syracuse football training camp style of Syracuse Sports. Welcome aboard, friends. Great to have you here. Hope you have subscribed on Spotify, on Apple, Syracuse Orange Sports, on YouTube as well. So whenever a new episode of Syracuse Sports pops up, here we will be ready to talk to you. Syracuse football training camp has arrived, and we'll have plenty of podcast coverage here on Syracuse Sports and with our Syracuse Sports Insiders. Throughout training camp, our observations off the practice field come to our Syracuse Sports Insiders first. Your questions answered here on this podcast, as we're about to do here shortly, and so much more by becoming a Syracuse Sports Insider. This is the time of year to do it, friends, with extensive training camp coverage. Just text the word orange to 315-847-3895. If you've missed previous episodes of Syracuse Sports, the Olympics are going on right now. You missed our guy, Mike Tirico. But Mike, when back in the day when you took the baton from Bob Costas and maybe had a conversation with Bob and got some advice, I'm sure the first thing that Bob said is, well, Mike, when you work with Snoop Dogg, here's what you need to do.
Right, exactly.
Also, recent guest on Syracuse Sports, the voice of Team USA basketball, Noah Eagle.
I had gone to a Team USA summit a couple months ago where I got to see Grant Hill, who's a part of the Team USA infrastructure, Jim Tooley, the CEO of Team USA. So getting to talk to them just in general and hearing about the process of selecting the teams, hearing about who they would think they could leave on and off some of the teams, if you get my drift on the women's side.
Noah Eagle, Mike Tirico, recent guests here on Syracuse Sports. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a thing. Let's get to it, because our Syracuse Sports Insiders had lots of great questions for Emily Liker and I. Training camp, football? Let's do it. You have many questions about Syracuse football training camp. Hopefully, between the two of us, we have answers. Brent Axe, Emily Liker. It's here. It's training camp. Summer's over. Emily, you ready to dive back in here and do this thing?
You know, I am. I'm always like, July is like creeps by, and I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, football season's getting closer, and I don't know if I'm ready yet. And then I go to kickoff, and I'm like, actually, I am ready for football.
Let's go.
It like kicks it into gear for me. So yes, I'm ready now.
Same thing. Summer's just killing time till football season, as I like to say. And here it is. And we sent it out to our Syracuse Sports Insiders, the things that are on their mind with training camp here. We'll certainly be checking in throughout training camp with a number of podcasts and, of course, our coverage on syracuse.com and with our Syracuse Sports Insiders. So stay tuned to that. But here are a few things that were on your mind as we get underway here. So we turn it over to our Syracuse Sports Insiders, who sent in some great questions for us to answer here on the eve of training camp, Emily. And the first one comes from Roger B., who says, why are the air quotes experts so down on Syracuse football, picking them 10th in the ACC, question mark? Now, I didn't see the specific prediction he's referring to there. And look, my instinct here is to push back. My instinct here is to say they have to earn it for all of the things they did in the offseason. They were a 6-win football team last year and all the cliches, Emily. Like, you got to earn it on the field, right?
And barely a 6-win team last year.
Exactly. Where I'll somewhat agree with Roger, though, is it is talking season. It is preseason, right? And if you want to be bold here and take a step forward, and this is the time of year when you're trying to assess all those things and put all the cliches into play here, if they stay healthy and if all the ifs, right? This is the time of year where if you want to take a swing and say, I think it's going to play out that Syracuse is going to be 5th in the ACC, or they're going to make the playoff, or if you want to stand out and you mean it, that's the key here. If you genuinely feel, as we see the tides turn in all sports, let alone football, that they'll be good. Now's the time to do it. Now's not the time to play it safe, be conservative, and be like, yeah, we'll pick them 10th. And then when they finish 6th, it's the old sales adage, right? You under promise, you over deliver. So I get what Roger's saying, but I keep coming back to, well, they got to earn this respect. That's how this goes.
Yeah, no, I think that's a big part of it, right? Is no one's seen what this team looks like in an actual game on an actual field yet. And so, especially from that more like national expert like position, like those are the moments that those people watch. They are not in the day-to-day as much as we are, and like hearing how good Kyle McCord's looked in practice and stuff necessarily. So I think if I'm trying to put myself in their headspace, that's certainly what I feel like people are working for or looking for. A couple other things I'll say to that point is 10th in a 17-team ACC is a lot different than 10th in a 14-team ACC. So like, think about that. There are more teams now. Like that's upper
middle of the pack. Yeah.
That's like upper middle pack of the conference, which would be great for Syracuse considering the past few years. Like last year, they only had 2 conference wins. If they're 10th in the ACC this year, that means they certainly had more conference wins than 2. Secondly, like I always would remind people to like look at what the exact phrasing of those lists are, because like you said, this is the time of talking, and a lot of those lists are phrased differently. Like some are preseason rankings, some are projected order of finish, and those are like very different categories. Like a preseason ranking, I totally get ranking Syracuse 10th or even lower because we don't know anything about them as an on-field team, and you're doing a preseason ranking mostly off of what last year's results kind of showed you and who's returning, whereas like an order of finish projection, you would hopefully be looking more at, okay, well, Syracuse's schedule is on the easier side, and this is what this looks like, and yada, yada, yada. So I will say the official ACC preseason rankings that we vote on at ACC kickoff, I would guess come out this week. They were voted on. You have to submit your votes by Monday afternoon. So I would guess those come out this week. That is a projected order of finish. I won't reveal where I voted yet. I usually do, but I won't reveal yet. But I will say this year's ACC is like really interesting in that like no team presents as like definitely going to be dominant. Like even Florida State and Clemson, I think there are questions about. I think people are concerned about scheduling things or transitioning players. Like over half of the conference has a new QB from out of conference this.
And there's a lot of good QBs there.
Yeah, there's always a lot of good QBs, but
they're all
a lot
new.
of them we haven't seen. They're all new. So the ACC is like in a really interesting place this year, especially for like this like preseason, like, okay, we have to pick rankings without having seen anyone yet. So like, don't put too much stock in it. If you want to believe that Syracuse is going to be 5th, believe that.
Go for it.
I don't know.
Go for it. Now, of the Maxwell Award winners that came out, which is going to transition to our next question nicely here. I didn't even plan it that way. 80 Maxwell Award winners, nominees, pardon me, were announced this week. Maxwell Award goes to the best player in the country, right? It's one of the more prestigious awards in college football. It's like a level below the Heisman. The league that had the most nominees was the ACC. There's a lot of good quarterbacks in this league. So I would look at it this way. You know, what do pundits look at in the offseason, right? They look at coach. Well, there's a new coach. They look at experience. Syracuse does have, 13 remaining starters coming back, but a lot of new faces that are going to work their way into that rotation. Schedule. On paper, Syracuse has what you would consider to be an easier schedule, considering they don't play the usual top heavies in the ACC, right? Quarterback. That leads us to our next question from Chris. Why is Kyle McCord not getting any respect? Emily, I'm always fascinated by the eternal search for respect that fans are on with their teams, which, again, you have to earn, right? And here's the thing, Chris, I have to disagree with you. He is getting respect, and plenty of respect, other than Ohio State fans. Okay, Ohio State fans are crapping all over him still. months after he has moved on somewhere else. But I mentioned it. Maxwell Award nominees came out yesterday. 80 players in the country. You know who was on that list? Kyle McCord. Emily, you can tell me what you heard at ACC Media Days, but I watched all those ACC Network shows and watched all that coverage. Heard a lot of respect from Kyle McCord. I've been a guest on a number of radio shows in different markets on Sirius XM radio throughout the offseason. Heard a lot of respect for Kyle McCord. A lot of people saying, hey, that's a big pickup for Syracuse to get a quarterback like Kyle McCord. His stats, his numbers, people build into the conversation that he was hurt last year. I've heard nothing but respect for Kyle McCord. So I don't know where Chris's question comes from in the sense. Maybe he's not ranked high enough on some of these lists, but we just brought it up. There's a lot of good quarterbacks that are in the ACC. And I think he's in that mix. I think he's in that conversation. So we can haggle on where the rankings are, but I'm just not seeing. Maybe I'm in the wrong corners of the internet. Okay. And frankly, if there are corners of the internet that are disrespecting Kyle McCord, I don't want to be there anyway, right? Because they're just, I don't think that is prudent at this point. He has to earn it and he has to show what he can do at Syracuse. I understand that, but I don't know about you, Emily. I'm not seeing this disrespect out there.
Yeah, I think the argument comes from him not being on some of these, like, again, like these preseason rankings and things that are like all speculative and like kind of just like opinion based and like it's hard. It is like you guys can, and you guys being fans can like think that it would be easy for us to like name who's going to be the best quarterback in the ACC this year. But like, it's not. Like, even looking at where they stand on papers, there's always so many unknowns in a football season. Like,
well, what was the one Justin Barron was upset about? Oh, it's the Phil Steele list. Yeah. He looked at the Phil Steele list and Kyle was not one of those 4 quarterbacks, which if that lights your fire and that's going to make you hit harder at practice and go faster to start the season, hey, whatever fuels you, man. Michael Jordan, invented grudges so he would play harder, right? But there's a lot of good quarterbacks in this league, as Emily was saying.
Right. There's a lot of good quarterbacks. I certainly think there could have been an argument for him to be on that list, and he just wasn't. And like, that's fine. Phil Steele does, though, have him ranked as the number 9 best available quarterback for the upcoming draft cycle, which like, shouldn't that mean more? That means respect to me. Like, he thinks you're a top 10 draft available quarterback. Like, I would take that more heavily than I would not being one of the top 4 quarterbacks in the ACC preseason. Like, so yeah, I think again, it comes from these preseason lists, which like, again, like you said, if you want to use it as fuel, if you want to use it as a chip on your shoulder, I think Kyle has a chip on his shoulder for other reasons, as he talked about ACC kickoff. So I don't think he's really,
where else this comes
too
from?
Much mind, but
Emily, is that Hard Knocks clip where Marvin Harrison Jr., it was kind of a shorter throw from McCord and the Giants quarterback coach. Like, they do this stuff at the combine. He was trying to get him to be like, oh yeah, that was a crappy throw by your quarterback, right? And Marvin Harrison Jr. was not taking the bait on that. It's like, that's one throw that Kyle McCord made that they're testing a player on here. You can isolate and make highlight reels of so many things. I can make you a highlight reel that makes Kyle McCord look like he won the Heisman versus somebody who was the worst quarterback in football last year, right? So it's all perspective and I guess what you're looking for, but I don't see it. I'm sure I could search Twitter right now and find somebody disrespecting Kyle McCord, but I don't think that's the majority at this point. Which brings us to our next question. Michael W., and I'll turn the first one over to you, Emily. Which transfer will have the biggest impact on this team?
I mean, it has to be Kyle. It has to be Kyle just because he's the quarterback. And like, if they didn't have Kyle, like, yes, there are more bodies in that quarterback room now, but I don't know that any of them is prepared to be quarterback 1 in week 1, right as the season starts. And so it has to be Kyle. If I'm trying to get away from talking about Fidel, Deuce, like, it might be one of the defensive guys. Like, yes, actually, no. You know who I'll say it is? And we'll get to this later a little bit more when we talk about offensive line. Savion Washington.
That's a good choice.
That's probably going to be my pick. I think he is going to end up being a very important presence on this O-line, which Yeah, I'll save some of this for later, but
Okay.
Savion Washington
Okay.
would be my pick behind Kyle.
But see, that's a good chicken egg thing. If Washington's successful, that means that McCord's successful, right?
Right.
It's harder for that to go the other way. So I think that's a great choice. Which true freshman will get the most playing time? Now, as much as you guys know, I am driving the Yassine Willis bandwagon, and we're charging 60 miles per hour ahead here. I think the answer is Marcellus Barnes Jr. because he has come in, he's pushing for time. He, I think, could be on the depth chart if Syracuse puts out a depth chart here to start. I know looking back on our depth chart at the end of spring, Emily, looking at the defense, we did project him to be in the lineup along with Jaden Bellamy on the other side. There's a lot of defensive backs. There's the star position, of course, with Justin Barron here. But for a freshman to walk in and make that impact and be on the field, I'm going to say him, but look, Willis is going to play. He's going to get carries. Somebody even asked me how many carries is he going to take away from LaQuinn Allen. My answer is some, but not enough because LaQuinn is clearly RB1 here. But the fact that we're having this conversation and both of these names were Fran Brown recruits, it tells you the instant impact he made in that department.
Yeah, well, and with Willis and Allen, it is interesting too, I'll add. Obviously, they just very recently picked up Will Nixon as well, Jeff Nixon's son, who was on a national championship team last year, not the winning team, but played in the national championship with Washington. He wasn't their number one back, but he was their number two. So like Yassine Willis is going to have his moment. I don't know if it'll be this year. I think I would agree that Marcellus Barnes is probably going to be the impact freshman and the one that gets the most playing time.
Mark C. says, how have the returning players bought into Coach Fran's culture? Emily, what did you hear from those guys at ACC kickoff? And I know you've had the opportunity to talk to them in other places. We've certainly seen some interviews. We talked to them in the spring. But that's why I think this is a good question now. Now that spring is over, I've already sensed something different coming into fall camp about just exactly what's expected of these returning players, and I feel a full buy-in. Do you feel the same?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've been talking and writing about the buy-in from returning players since days before the Boca Raton Bowl, which was like less than a month after. It was 2 weeks after Fran was like on campus. I wrote a piece that I think the night before about him recruiting returning players back. And I mean, all you have to do is look at the fact that pretty much every important player who could have returned from last year did. Marlo Wax is back. Justin Barron is back. Rhonda Gadsden is back. LaQuinn Allen is back. Like Elijah Clark is back. Every guy that could have been a blow for Syracuse if they left came back to play for this guy. Even those who strongly considered the transfer portal, who had to consider things like, how is this new scheme going to impact my draft stock, like Justin Barron and Marlo Wax, like all of those guys felt confidently enough in Fran from early December when he was introduced that this was going to be where they should play and where they should spend their final year. And everything since then has continued to show that that's true. And everyone's talked about like, yes, like his energy on the field. Like there's no doubt that these returning guys are bought in. And like, I know we'll continue to talk about it because it is, I guess, interesting, but like they're bought in. Like I don't have any doubt about that in my mind.
Right. And this is not, I've done this enough where I know when somebody's telling me what I want to hear and when I believe what they're saying. And I believe, look, Justin Barron and Marlo Wax in particular, those guys could have moved on either through the transfer portal or in Marlo's case to take a shot at the National Football League. And what we have heard over and over again, Emily, from recruits, from transfers, from fans, from people that have met Fran Brown as they walk away with this impression about how genuine he is and what his message is. And that has been a consistent theme from everybody that's come across him in this offseason. And that has helped that buy-in that you're talking about here. We'll see if it produces results. But Mark, there is no question that they have bought into this. Daniel P., my man, says, which assistant coach has been most impressive or impactful as you have seen? You know, Emily, I don't want to cop out here and go with a group, but I'm going to. It's the training staff. Nothing against Jeff Nixon and Elijah Robinson and any assistant coach that you named that is working with their particular position group. The most impactful to use Dan's question, that we have seen right off the bat is what this training staff has done to literally whip this team into shape. So many guys we saw in spring, 10, 15 pounds of muscle added. The players describing what it was like. I particularly remember Jackson Meeks during spring ball saying, would you believe me if I said that this is harder than it was at Georgia, right? Mm-hmm. And I laughed at him. I said, no, I don't believe you, right? But he said, okay, you'll see. Now we're going to see that here in training camp and what has even happened in the summer between spring and now. But that training staff came in and has immediately made the impact. What would you go with, though, Emily?
That's a really good pick. And it hadn't even crossed my mind. I was thinking about traditional kind of like assistants and on-field. The first one who popped to mind for me was Nick Williams, defensive edge coach. And obviously he's working right with Elijah Robinson. But, you know, he's one of the younger guys on this staff who doesn't have as much coaching experience, but everyone loves him. He was the guy who helped bring King Joseph Edwards here, who obviously the fan base has been really riled up about, and who is another one of those freshmen that might see some time this year, should see some time this year. And, you know, he's just like a good guy to talk to. He has a really interesting backstory. He was one of the first of the new batch of assistants that I got to sit down with one-on-one and kind of hear how he got here. And then, you know, like obviously Deion Sanders is in there because he was just at Colorado, and he's cross paths with Brown before he was here and Robinson before he was here. And so like he's one of those guys that, like, you know, that in the next couple of years, like, he is going to be a very big name. So maybe like he's definitely been impactful so far, but I think we're going to see him grow a lot more impactful as he stays with this staff. And I mean, honestly, probably moves on and gets a bigger job as a coordinator or another position coach somewhere else.
Sean B says, what would you say is the ceiling and the floor for this team? His answer, by the way, ceiling is 11-1 regular season and a loss in the ACC title game. His floor, 8-4 with a bowl loss. I'm going to go a little lower than that, Sean. I'm going to say the floor is last year, 6-7. I think that's like bottom out. I'm not going to say any names as to not jinx anything, but let's say some key specific injuries happen on this team. They lose a couple games they're not supposed to. Stuff happens during the season, just total bottom out. That to me, like if you're 6-7 again, 6 wins, which last year was the accepted, in some cases, ceiling for this team that they had to achieve. That to me is that's the floor. The ceiling, 11-1 would be just everything goes right. They stay healthy. They manage that schedule. They punch up in a couple of games and they get to that ACC title game. That Syracuse-Miami game, the regular season finale at the Dome, is kind of looming as a game that could maybe decide some things and who's trying to compete for that ACC title game. But that's if so many things go right in year one. I'm going to agree with that. That's the ceiling. Like that's just everything goes right. And this team just punches every button it needs to perfectly here. So I'm going to kind of go in that range. Any adjustments on your end?
No, not really. My like semantics thing I've come up with that I've been saying to people is like, I pretty much have no doubt they're going to make 6 wins just because of how the schedule is set up and the caliber of talent they have on this team. Like, no doubt they're going to make a bowl game. They're going to get 6 wins. I feel pretty confident they can make 7. I wouldn't be surprised if they got 8 or above. 11-1, I guess I would say is the ceiling, but it would surprise me if they got there, just because like that's not a diss on the talent of this team or of Fran Brown as a coach, but like it is a year one. There are going to be things that don't mesh as perfectly as we think they're going to. There is always that game that's like a trap game that you're not thinking about and stuff like that. And so like I don't think it's impossible, but it would surprise me. But certainly this team is going to look better all around than last year's team, regardless of if like however many wins they get. Like even if they're 6-7 again, it's going to feel like a whole different 6-7 than last year did. Like I don't think there's going to be some horrible 3-week 4-week, 5-week losing streak where they get blown out by all those opponents or anything. So like, just because we're saying like 6-7 is the bottom for this team, or like the low bar, like that, I don't think, correct me if you feel differently, but I don't think that means we think they're going to like look the same way they did last year and it's going to be a
absolutely
bad
not.
6-7.
Absolutely not. There are many ways you can be 6-7. 6-7 and things were falling apart, and you could see why they needed the coaching change. And a tale we're going to tell here, Emily, during whenever it comes up, they're one win away from Dino Babers still coaching this football team. Like, if you believe John Wildak, who on the record said that, we could be talking about an entirely different feel around this football team right now. I agree with you. People have, for lack of a better term, more patience, more understanding, and again, injuries and all those things you got to account for. By the way, 11-1 is the ceiling. You are on your tippy toes, barely like getting that ceiling, okay? If they get there. And again, that's not a knock on Syracuse. It's really freaking hard to go 11-1 in college football if you're Georgia, okay? So for Syracuse to do it would be incredible, especially considering everything that's going on around this program. But great question there from Sean. All right, Emily, we got about 10 questions about the offensive line when we sent this out to our Syracuse Sports Insiders. So shout out to everybody that asked that, but I condensed it down here because Tampa Ron, I think, asked it the best. He said the big question on this team is the offensive line. With McCord being a pocket passer, has the size, speed, and ability improved over last year?
Size, yes, definitively. Like, they're bigger. There are bigger, like all the transfers they brought in for that line are bigger. Like Savion Washington is big. I don't have, let's see, I can pull up the roster real quick. I want to say
Big Spoon.
He's 6'8". Big Spoon is big.
There's a reason they call him Big Spoon, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And even the returning guys, Emily, the Cruzes of the world, the Bradfords of the world, Reed, they all look bigger. They all look toner. That training staff, went to work on these guys, and they have a new coach who I think has really whipped them into shape. And we heard that they're, and I feel like we hear a story from every team about this, but the summer workouts, the offensive line made a point to spend an extra half hour to 45 minutes working together and getting in rhythm and doing those things that they do have to build up to protect Kyle McCord.
Yeah. I heard that from pretty much everyone at ACC kickoff last week. It started with Fidel. He was the one that brought it up, talking about his peers across the line from him. And then Kyle echoed it, LaQuinn echoed it, Fran echoed it, Aronde the other day at an NIL event echoed it to me. So certainly like they've been putting in more work, which not that we like, I guess we don't really know if that had been happening for them the past few years, but we never heard about it. So the fact that that is happening at all makes me think that this line is more in sync, more focused, understands their specific importance on this team. I think one thing I was thinking about right before we hopped on, that I don't know how much we considered last year, but like last year's line was relatively young. I mean, the only returning starter was Chris Bleich, and then you had a bunch of younger guys who, yes, had played some, but only played some because they were forced to, like up until last year when they became starters. So I think too, just a lot of these guys that are returning are older, and so they should be better. They have more experience. They have more reps. There's certainly more depth that can play at a starting level on the O-line this year. Like I think we could confidently pick 10 names who could be starters, whereas in like previous years, it's been like
they're barely
we get to 7 and we're like, who are the other 3 on the depth chart going to be? And so I feel more confident than ever than I have in the O-line, and it does feel like the team is too. Obviously, we'll see this week as we start practice, and I'm looking forward to talking to some of the offensive linemen, but everything points to them understanding that they are kind of a linchpin to making this offense successful and letting Kyle McCord shine.
Well, Ron left this out of his question, but I'll add it. Size, speed, ability, depth. And you just touched on it, Emily. There is more depth. I was struck by, and I said this to a number of people, and it sounds like the simplest answer to the question, but you get this all the time too, I'm sure, wherever you go. And when people recognize what you do. Like, hey, Brent, how's the team looking? And my answer's been, they look like a football team. Because I haven't been able to say that. about Syracuse, top to bottom on the depth chart, to be honest, over the last decade or so, whatever the case may be. There's different spots on the field where I could say that. I look at the offensive line now, I'm like, they look like a football team. And that is about as good of a compliment as I can give them. A couple more here, Emily. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think one of the questions that got left out related to the O-line was, like, Jayon is Big General. There's a lot of big guys on this offensive line with their nickname. Is Big General John Ray Reed a lock at starter at center going in? And I do think so. He's one of those guys who's been named as like a motivator and leader in this offseason work. So he is one of those guys from last year that I think certainly retained his starting role, just because I know people are fans of him.
Good point. I love this question from James, but it speaks to something bigger I want to hit on. The question specifically is, will we actually see Max Mang line up as a unicorn fullback in this new Prostyle offense? There's two things that come to mind from that question. Number one, James, I hope so, because I want to see the wrinkles. I want to see something different. I want to see just exactly what this Prostyle offense means from Jeff Nixon. But Emily, as much as fun things, you know how adamant I am that they should throw their tight end more and things of that nature. But here's what people need to understand. When they say Prostyle offense, what is that? They're going to run the football more, and they want to run the football better. The emphasis they had, you talked to Aronde Gatson about this, and he's discussed this a little bit. We saw it in spring. What they focused on with Gatson in the spring, run blocking. Max Mang, run blocking. All the tight ends, Dan Villari included, run blocking. Bigger offensive line. Why? Run the football. Okay? LeQuint is back. Yassine, you mentioned Nixon's son, is now on this team. Fran Brown, big people beat up little people, right? So as much as Kyle McCord, the vastly disrespected Kyle McCord, comes up here in the conversation for good reason, they're going to run the football. They want to run the football, and they want to run the football down people's throats and want to be in the fourth quarter as the team that's, you know, not sucking wind out there, and they look like the bigger, stronger team. So, while people think Prostyle and their heads start going about what plays can I replicate on College Football 25, how about, you know, Vince Lombardi? There's a seal here, and there's a seal here, and you got to go up the alley, right? They want to run the ball. That's what they want to do.
Well, and I'll say that even Kyle obviously was not a running quarterback last year. Negative 65 yards, I think, was his stat line for running, or for rushing. He said, like, one of his goals this year, and one of the things he wants to get better at as he tries to raise his NFL draft stock, is extending plays on his feet. And so I think we're going to see Kyle run some as well. Now, not as much as Garrett, not as recklessly as Garrett, I would assume. I don't think I'm going to be sitting in the press box being like, oh my God, is Garrett Schrader going to get, or is Kyle McCord going to get up from that run the same way I was with Garrett a couple times last year? But I think we'll see Kyle run more too than we're expecting, especially after talking with him last week.
No question about it. Those are just some of the questions from our Syracuse Sports Insiders. You guys are going to have plenty of questions throughout training camp, and make sure you keep them coming by becoming a Syracuse Sports Insider. Text the word orange to 315-847-3895. Your questions welcome throughout camp. Emily, Chris Carlson, and I are going to be sending you our training camp observations. As soon as we walk off the field, you're the first people. It's not going to be on Twitter. It's not going to be on social media. Our Syracuse Sports Insiders are going to get the first perspectives from our practice observations, podcasts, and so much more as we go through training camp, because football's here, kids. Summer is over. Let's do this thing. Thank you, Emily. So many fantastic questions from you guys. Thanks for sending them in, and thanks for being a Syracuse Sports Insider. This is the best time of year to do it. Training camp is here, and you are going to get our training camp observations off the practice field first. You're going to hear interviews, sound bites, inside analysis, opinions, your questions. What do you want me to ask Fran Brown? What do you want me to ask Kyle McCord, Fidel Diggs, Justin Barron, fill in the blank, whoever it shall be? That's what being a Syracuse Sports Insider is all about. Direct text message access to me. You can try it free for 2 weeks. It's just $3.99 a month after that. 315-847-3895. That's the Syracuse Sports Insider text line. Text the word orange to that number if you haven't signed up today and become a Syracuse Sports Insider. I want to thank our featured band today. We've been featuring some of your original music here on Syracuse Sports. Exploding Flowers. Love that band name. You can find all their information in their YouTube channel in the show notes, and all the information in the show notes on how you can get in touch with me so we can feature your original music here on Syracuse Sports. Thanks for listening today. Thanks for watching today. Football is here. Training camp is here, and we are going to have extensive coverage of that right up until the start of Syracuse in Ohio, about a month from today. Can you believe it? We're getting closer to the start of Syracuse football.
Did you believe